Now I'm happy to turn it over to Michael Cipra. He is the Executive Director of the North Coast Regional Land Trust. And his background is varied. He has lectured at HSU for conservation leadership kinds of programs. He's worked in several national parks, and most recently Death Valley, doing conservation work there. And he's been with the Land Trust for 2 years. And we are very excited to have him present to you tonight.
So yeah, my name's Mike, and we've got a nice small crowd. So if folks have questions, please just interrupt as you're going. Don't be intimidated by the lecture format or videographer. And I wanted to also wish everyone a happy Veterans Day, veterans and their families, and all of us. Thanks for coming out tonight. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit tonight about North Coast Regional Land Trust, what we do, who we are, why it matters, and I have also a video too to show. So, but again, along the way, if you have questions about some of the things that I'm presenting, I really welcome comments, questions, ideas, expertise from folks who are here as well. So, North Coast Regional Land Trust has been around since about 2000, and the whole idea that to start with was, what if we get people from lots of different walks of life, different backgrounds, people from the ranching community, people from environmental sciences, people from wildlife background, people from fisheries background, people maybe who come from local businesses. And what if we get together and figure out the 80% that we all agree? So coming from across the political spectrum, coming from different realms of conservation backgrounds, and trying to figure out different ideas, and you can see are made up from across the community. And that's been in the DNA of North Coast Regional Land Trust in the beginning, is to make sure that we're reaching out to every different aspect of the community. It makes for incredibly interesting conversations in the boardroom, but I know then when we come out, we're working on projects that serve our entire community. So this is our service areas: Humboldt, Trinity, and Delaware counties. It's over 5 million acres. And to give you an idea, the stuff that's in green is some of our public lands, national forests, state parks. These things that are in pink are these areas that we've worked with landowners, with private landowners, cooperatively to protect forever. And I'll explain sort of how. This is tribal land up here. But you can see that we're starting to put together conservation projects that stretch from this national forest to the ocean, from 6 rivers to the sea. And that's some of the vision of what we've been working on, how we've been working cooperatively with landowners. So we believe that in these areas that we work in, that wildlife habitat and keeping intact large working landscapes are synonymous, that those two things work together. That when land is cut up into smaller and smaller pieces and subdivided, these lands are damaged. Often in our county, those lands turn into marijuana farms. And I'm not stigmatizing, I'm just saying these are the things that happen. And often when that happens, there is some damage to our environment, whether it's to our rivers and streams from extraction of water, whether it's from rodenticides, whether we see that that's a pattern that happens. So what we like to do is to work to keep these large blocks of land intact, because we know they're going to function better as wildlife habitat, and they're going to function better for our economies. So I want to tell a little story, a little bit about why I do this, why I'm here. This is in Southern California. I grew up in Long Beach, just south of LA. It was a really urban landscape. I went to high school with Snoop Dogg, and I didn't see a lot of the outdoors. My exposure to the outdoors was the Tehachapi Mountains, and I was privileged enough to go there because my grandpa stretched the family's finances in the 50s and 60s to buy some land in the Tehachapi Mountains, and he built this cabin himself. There he was. Built this cabin himself using no power tools, a pretty modest little cabin, but it was perfect for going up there. He would bring me and my brother up there, and because we hadn't been outside much, we were a little scared to get outside, so he would pay us a nickel a lizard to catch lizards. Don't worry, it was catch and release. We put him in a bucket, and then when we weren't looking, he would put him back outside. But he got us out into the streams, fishing, hiking, exploring, learning the names of animals, plants, planting trees. When we were older, they had us planting trees on the hillside. Later we did a little sustainable harvest around Christmas. We always given a Christmas tree up there. Well, as time went on, my grandpa passed away, and it fell to the next generation. And there were a couple kids in the next generation, and some of the land had to be sold to pay some taxes. The land was subdivided, and it was subdivided around this cabin that he had built. So different pieces of it. And over time, that land was in different ownership, fell to different folks, and there was some illegal marijuana cultivation up there. So not so great things happening on adjacent lands. Well, most recently, and this was 2 years ago, my dad went there, and he was working on the cabin, just fixing it up, and he had a run-in with one of these neighbors. He had a heart incident. And he says it was because of the altitude. But after that, this land was then permanently sold from our family. And I share this story because it sort of motivates me to try to keep land intact. I've seen what can happen. So the logical question is, great, that's Southern California, there's lots of land pressures there. Is that the same threat here? And in fact, what we're finding is that there is significant pressure to subdivide land. And families aren't necessarily talking about this. They're not, it's a very difficult thing, it's a very emotional thing, land. And often what happens is someone passes away, and that's the catalyst for talking about it, and it's often too late at that point. And you can see that the demographics of land ownership in Humboldt County are changing, and folks are getting older, and there's also more pressure. There's more pressure, economic pressure to subdivide. So here's what the Land Trust essentially does. We offer consultations with landowners, and we look at the property that they have, and we evaluate its conservation values, its value as wildlife habitat. We evaluate its value in terms of its working land, its components. So how productive that land is, and we also evaluate the risk. And then we communicate with the family whether there's a possibility of a conservation agreement or conservation easement that could help protect that land. And for conservation easements or these conservation agreements, they can work a number of different ways. What it essentially does is it takes the value in the subdivision, the ability to divide the land, and it retires that ability to divide the land. And so the landowner sometimes donates that value. Sometimes the landowner agrees to sell a portion of the value. What most often happens is the landowner agrees to donate a portion of the value, and then there's some compensation as well. And we work with a couple of different partners, the State of California's Wildlife Conservation Board and the Forest Legacy Conservation Program through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So basically, there are these public agencies who have said the wildlife values, for example, are so high in this land that it's worth an investment of money to keep it whole, to keep it healthy and functioning. And we, as taxpayers and voters in the state of California, have voted for this again and again. We've said that our wildlife and our healthy rivers and streams and our land are really important things, and so we're going to continue to invest in this. And conservation easements are one of the best investments because it keeps the most land whole per dollar per acre. So this is one tool that we've used. A couple different misconceptions about easements. People feel like if there's a conservation easement, then they lose control of their land. It's not true. The Land Trust does not take control of the land. This is still private land. People have a misconception that if there's a conservation easement, I can't still do ranching. I can't do a sustainable timber harvest. That's also not true. We set up agreements so that people can continue to make a living from the land. And we believe that that's going to help keep the land intact over the long term. I'm going to tell you a little bit about a couple of properties that the Land Trust does own and what's going on in those properties. They're really close to us. Most of the land we protected is in partnership with private landowners. We own a few pieces of land. This one is Freshwater Farms Reserve, and this is just south of Three Corners. Three Corners is up in here, and this is about a third of a mile south. This is Myrtle Avenue, right here. Eureka is over this way. And it's bounded by freshwater slough. This is a picture of what it looked like, sort of semi-historically. All of our lands, our tide lands in Humboldt Bay, were drained and diked and levied, and that land was then turned to agriculture. That's kind of the history of this area, and this piece of property is no different. It's about 74 acres. Well, what we did was say, maybe we can have both. Maybe we can have both cows and coho. This land and water was incredibly productive as an estuary for coho salmon. So we helped design a restoration project. You can see we excavated some of these different channels and looked at old geologic maps. And then after excavating them, we removed the tide gate that was down here and allowed the natural tidal system to come back in. A lot of people were really concerned about this. They said you can't have both cows and coho on the same land. You're going to fail at both. You're not going to be able to use this pasture anymore, and this is not going to be productive for coho. Well, we did that in 2009. So the results are in. The coho are coming back. They're growing 4 times faster in that restored estuary than they are in the main stem of freshwater creek, because it's really productive off-channel habitat. They're using it in increasing numbers. And it's also productive agricultural land, grazing land, and also you may have seen Neal and Glen farm stand. If you've driven by there on Myrtle Avenue, look for it. There's active agriculture going on. There's an organic farm stand. There's also grazing for grass-fed beef on that property. So we're proving that it can happen. And this is sort of where that first restoration took place, where you saw there was water coming in. We're designing a second phase of restoration here, create more of that off-channel habitat. We're almost done with the designs and working on the permitting, and hopefully we'll be able to put that on the ground in 2016. Again, applying 5 years of data about how the fish are using this to create more habitat. And we couldn't do any of this work without partners. We're relying on data from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. We work in partnership with these folks. And again, that's part of the land trust ethos, is we have to work together, otherwise we're not going to get anything done. So, along those same lines, we have education programs, active education programs out there at Freshwater Farms Reserve. And we bring out, we brought out about 5,000 kids at this point to look at those sort of land use dynamics of can you have both agriculture and restoration on the same property? Do cows and coho work? And kids are able to take samples. They're able to apply scientific method. And then also, I love this one because we've got both the restoration aspect, and then you've got some working lands over here, grinding some apples up for cider. So yeah, again, this is an exciting thing that's happening right now, and we're building a nature trail out at Freshwater Farms Reserve, so that you and your families can go out there and you can see yourselves. So we're opening that up. We should have that nature trail completely done. We're having a grand opening out there at Freshwater Farms Reserve on May 1st, 2016. Come on out. It'll be really fantastic. A great opportunity to see that land and kind of learn its story firsthand. We also own some land up at Redwood Creek in Warwick. The idea of this land ownership is continue to have agriculture, to work with landowners up there to maybe find some solutions, long-term solutions to the Redwood Creek estuary, and see if we can balance agriculture and restoration there. We're in early stages of talking through some of those issues. Martin Slough. So for reference, this is the golf course in Eureka. This is the Martin Slough property that we own. This is one of the channels to it. You can see it's agricultural land, bordering forest. And it also happens to be one of the most productive areas in our region for coho salmon. What I mean is they're growing really fat there. This is a 0+ year coho. And when I show this picture to fish biologists in Oregon, they say there's no way that's a 0+ year fish. It's too big. And then I tell them that it's growing right next to a field where there are cows, and then right downstream, or excuse me, right upstream, there's a golf course. They say double no way. But the data don't lie, and it's showing that right here in our backyard, we have amazingly productive waterways and systems for salmon if we let them pass through. And that's part of what this project was about. This is Alan Ranger from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. He's emptying a stream right there in front of one of our projects to build this tide gate to allow the fish to come through, reduce the risk of flooding. We put this in last fall, opened it up, and it's working great. The fish are able to pass through this. It reduces the risk of flooding, catastrophic flooding, that could wipe out some of that habitat as well as agricultural land. We're working on a more advanced restoration design for that project as well. So that's some of the things that we're doing here on land that we own. Again, mixing cows and coho, mixing agriculture and restoration, showing it can be done. And these are living laboratories where we can design other restorations from. That's the idea. So folks have any questions about some of these projects that we have? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question about the manure. Is this considered a salt marsh, and does the marsh like take care of
It is salt marsh.
and
So part of that restoration project at Freshwater Farms Reserve was to restore salt marsh habitat. So to give you an idea of its effectiveness, when we completed it, those areas were about 17% native plants. After 5 years of monitoring, they're about 80% native plants. So the salt marsh habitat is coming back, it's healthy, and part of the testing in these areas, part of the monitoring is for water quality, and we're finding that there's not been an impact from the grazing to water quality. And
so you don't have to like fence the animals away from the water?
We do. We don't let the cows go right up to the creek. Yeah, there is fencing, there's a pasture area, but the elevations are such that we're seeing that there's absorption of nutrients in that pasture, and that it's not making its way to the water and affecting water quality. So yes, that's a great question. We do fence. The cows are not in the creek, and they're not in the salt marsh itself. The idea is they're next to each other.
And do you have ownership
We do
of
have,
that land, and then are you leasing the pasture land?
correct. Yeah, we lease that to Sean and Kathy O'Day, who are neighbors across the street. And from what they've seen, they're now considering a restoration on the property that connects to ours. So for us, it's about, again, reaching out to lots of different folks, building confidence, allowing people to come in, testing these different theories. We don't necessarily know the end, but if we don't try, we're not going to have the habitat. So, yeah.
What's going to happen with the old nursery building?
Great question. So on this property, there was a nursery that was run by Rick Story for quite a while. Rick has sadly and tragically passed. We are going to rehabilitate that historic nursery and the historic barn. And I say that with some confidence because we have the funding for it. We're going to be doing that in 2016. We just acquired the funding. So yes, we are going to be rehabilitating that native plant nursery, and we are going to be rehabilitating our historic barn that was built in 1910. And part of that historic barn is going to be a wet weather classroom for the kids who come to that property. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so those are the things that we own, and I talked at the beginning about things that we don't own, so I want to jump to those. What I'd like to do is take us on a tour of the different conservation easements that we've worked with, and some of the ones that we're working on, to give you a sense of this geographic scope. And I put together a little Google Earth tour, and it should be firing up here in just a minute. And as I do, it's going to move pretty quickly, so maybe hold questions until the end of this. But this is our service area, again, Humboldt, Trinity, and Delaware counties. The properties in pink are the ones that we're working on. The ones in orange are the ones that we've completed. It's going to mostly move south and north, but jump around a little bit. So that's the overview. And again, these are conservation agreements or easements we work with landowners on to protect habitat forever. This is the Valley View Ranch, and it's just outside of Petrolia, so if you've ever been down to Petrolia, maybe going down to the Lost Coast, this protects the viewshed there. It also protects the North Fork of the Mattole River. The landowner is voluntarily working on salmon restoration projects on this land, and that's protected again forever. Moving south, just south of the Humboldt County line there. This is a project kind of in the heart of the Lost Coast, one of the most productive salmon-bearing streams in all of the North Coast is Indian Creek. That's on there for both coho and Chinook salmon, and that conservation easement was protected forever. We're working with the landowner on that right now. This is Price Creek. This is between Ferndale and Scotia. Back in there, next with other conservation easements to create a corridor to the ocean. And it's about a 1,200, 1,300 acre ranch. Riparian habitat containing willow, alder, and other species. This is out by Xenia, just across the Trinity County line. There's about 1,000 acres out there. There was a donated easement, donated by the landowner there. There's a hydropower project that's right next to it. And it protects a patchwork of forest land and also open prairies. Moving up, these are the two largest projects that we've worked on. You have Chalk Mountain Ranch to your left and Charles Mountain Ranch to your right, and these connect a corridor of land between the Six Rivers National Forest and stretching all the way to Bridgeville. They're about 16,000 acres of land. We're currently in discussions with the landowner that's right between them, connecting those as well. This is one of my favorites. It's the Iapay Ranch. This was on the chopping block, 44 different patent parcels ready to be sold, and the land trust worked with the landowner to protect this forever, about 5,000 acres. And if you like oak woodlands, that's some of the most beautiful oak woodlands in the county. Just across the Mad River is the 15,000 acre Hunter Ranch, and we're working to get a conservation easement on that one. 2 miles of Mad River frontage. I've got some cool pictures of this one. Really just beautiful, beautiful country. Roosevelt elk on the property, black-tailed deer. Moving up north to Willow Creek, we work with this landowner. You can see there's both some current projects and some previous projects. This is the southern extent of Port Orford cedar. Healthy Port Orford cedar with no root rot. These trees are magnificent. And this is as far south as they grow. So working on to protect that North Forest is a really a real privilege. To give you an idea of context, we've talked about these properties already. We recognize this as the Martin Slough property that has pasture land. Martin Slough itself, the waterway that produces those really big, fast-growing fish, that's right along here, goes up to the golf course and to ponds up there. We're working with the golf course to design that restoration on their property as well. This is that Freshwater Farms Reserve, and the trail that I talked about is going to traverse along the outside and actually go into that salt marsh restoration. We're building a platform right now so you can bring your families out there and safely. Going north, this is a property up on the Klamath. This is the Klamath River. It's about 127 acres, and the landowner there has done active restoration projects on his property for coho salmon. We're working to see if we can put a conservation easement to protect those investments in coho. Also for bird habitat. So that's the Google tour. We just traveled hundreds of miles, saw thousands of acres. Yeah, I just want to give you a sense of the scope of it. All right. I had to get some pictures of wildlife in here somewhere. This is out there on Chalk Mountain Ranch. Deer running around all over. I saw a couple last week when I was out there with the landowner. Really magnificent habitat. And it's about 25,000 acres that we have worked on. We're working on about 20,000 more right now. So we're not stopping. And again, it's blending wildlife habitat values with working lands conservation. So to demonstrate that, I told you, we talked a little more about this Hunter Ranch. There are Roosevelt elk on the property. There are fissures along the Mad River. It includes Pilot Rock, which is a really culturally significant area for Native American folks. 2.5 miles of Mad River frontage. And this is, you saw on the map, it's all south facing. So if that becomes parcels, what happens to south-facing parcels with river access in Humboldt County? Yeah, that's what happens. This landowner is committed to protecting this and the resources. We were out with him and California Department of Fish and Wildlife. He was diving in the river with us looking for fish. So again, these are private landowners who are committed to this. We're working in partnership. And here's what Hunter Ranch looks like in the spring. Beautiful wildflowers, open meadows, and this oak woodland habitat, as you know, is great habitat for a number of different species. Really healthy oak woodland habitat. Indian Creek is down there, again, northern Mendocinos. This gives you an idea. If you've ever been out to the Sequoia Wilderness State Park, how many people here have hiked the Lost Coast? A couple people have. Lost Coast is just up here. Sequoia Wilderness State Park, Needle Rock is right here. And this property connects to it connects up an existing conservation easement out here at the Utah Forest with Sequoia Wilderness State Park. And backing on the property, this is the confluence of Anderson Creek and Indian Creek. I like to call this the heart of the Lost Coast. It's a really special place. And this has year-round water where lots of places in southern Humboldt really don't have water this time of year. I was out there a week and a half ago, and it was flowing, and there are fish in the stream. It's a really, really pretty magnificent spot. Bear all over this property, elk all over this property. Again, this is a wild, you can see, this is a wildlife corridor between the Wilderness State Park and this protected forest. So a lot of the properties we work on that we're able to work with landowners on, we're fortunate that they're connected. Some of these really important habitat areas that we have here. The reason that a lot of these organizations like the Wildlife Conservation Board want to invest in Humboldt County, we still have the roots. We still have the habitat. We still have the garden. This is a really special place that we live in, and we're proud to be a part of it. I always like to bring this up because we have lots of local land trusts that are doing a tremendous job, and our general mode is if the landowner comes to us and is working in someone else's area or their territory, we're going to refer the landowner to them. We're working in all those areas where there isn't a land trust to serve. We work in cooperation, we share resources, all of these different land trusts get together so that we can do a better job cooperatively. Again, that's the ethos of North Coast Regional Land Trust. We have a lot of outreach events. So if you're interested in canoeing out there at Freshwater Farms Reserve, we do that a couple times a year. We do, again, stressing the education. We do biological monitoring programs with Six Rivers Charter School. These students have come out every year, so different students, but the same class, to monitor this restoration, and we work with their data as well. It's kind of neat. People here locally are able to use this living laboratory and maybe train for a career in science. HSU students use the property as well for their research projects. I want to mention that we're an accredited land trust. What I mean is we put in place different standards and practices. What we've done, essentially, we monitor these easements. So we've said we're going to be around forever to make sure that what we've promised the public, that these stay intact. That's a bold claim to say that you're going to stay around forever. For those of you who are on a nonprofit board, you know that's a bold claim to say you're going to be around forever. It's a promise that we've made to the community. So we put in place really strict controls, standards, and business practices to make sure that we are going to be around. So folks have any questions before we jump into the movie? I've been talking for a while. I want someone else to. Yeah, Richard?
What kinds of staffing do you have that does the programming for school kids?
Great question. So what we do is we work cooperatively with Friends of the Dunes. And Friends of the Dunes does our cows and cattails program. So when you saw the younger students that are going out there on the property and capturing little critters and walking, and that's Friends of the Dunes. We go out with the curriculum and we do the fundraising around it. but we use their expertise, and we're really lucky to be able to work with them as a partner. For that biological monitoring program, you saw us working with the middle school students. That's our staff, Sarah Pilkington, who could not be here tonight. I apologize for her. She felt awful, but she felt awful. She was sick. So she wasn't able to make it here tonight. She can speak much more eloquently than I can about our education programs, but she implements that one, the biological monitoring program. Yeah.
So where do you get your funding from? You said you're in a coalition affiliation. Do you get government funding as well as private?
So I would say that our makeup is about a third grants, and within grants you have foundation and you have government. So I'd say it's about a third grants, about a third private donations. We have a really, as you know, we have a really generous community. We get private donations. We have an annual celebration every year. We just had ours in October. We're fortunate to have the support of the community for what we do. And then about a third of it is fee for service. What I mean is, if we have a property, in order to pay for the management of the property, we have a lease agreement with people who are running cattle on it, or who have a farm stand, or something like that. We also have fee for services agreements sometimes with landowners. So I would say the way I look at it as executive director, it's probably healthiest if it's distributed, about a third, a third, a third. And it fluctuates over time, depending on where funding is, what programming we're doing, what projects we're working on. So if you want to talk more in depth about money, I could go on and on, I'm sure people here don't want to hear it. But yeah, absolutely. We're definitely concerned with our sustainability over time, and that's a really important factor. And we're lucky to have a board of directors with folks with a lot of business experience to help guide the organization in that regard. Yeah.
One more question. Do you prefer to work with landowners just through easements, or do you equally prefer to acquire more land that you own and manage?
I think we prefer, at this point, I think I can speak for the organization, I think we prefer to work with private landowners. We feel like we can protect more, and this is a really critical, I think it's a critical moment in the history of Humboldt County in terms of where we are, what private land values look like, what the pressures are to subdivide. I think it's all about being efficient if we're going to protect some of the last best places. And we feel like we can be probably most effective in working with private landowners who are the stewards of land, and we work to put these agreements in place. I would say where there are opportunities to blend agriculture and restoration, we've seen that there can be challenges to that, whether those challenges are on the permitting side or design, or over at Martin Slough, there's a PG&E gas line that no one knew about. It's worth it to work through those challenges, but it takes a long time to do it and to put a restoration in the ground. So we're going to do it. We're committed to that on the properties we own, and I would say we don't have any appetite for owning new properties right now. Yeah.
So, since you're a relatively small staff, do you prioritize the private lands that come to you that want to work with you? So if you look at the three-county area, you say, okay, these are our priority ranch areas that we would like to work with.
Yeah.
So if you had five ranches that wanted to work with you at one time, obviously you have to say, okay, this is priority. This is a corridor, a piece that would complete a wildlife corridor, and it would connect to the national forest with this other property that we have. So do you have criteria that you set?
That's such a thoughtful question. Yeah, absolutely. So we have a conservation action plan that's linked to our strategic plan, that's sort of interlocking and sort of undergirds it and supports it. So we've taken a look at that as an organization and bringing in outside experts, looking at issues like sea level rise, looking at climate change, looking at pressures on landowners, looking at where endangered species are. So we look at all those things, and we've seen sort of what those general priorities are. We have resisted putting any particular properties on any maps because if we feel that it sort of puts a target on people. And so we don't do that. We don't do mapping exercises. We don't feel that they're particularly productive. What we do is develop these criteria. What are our conservation priorities? What are our working lands priorities? How do they fit together? And so when a project comes to us, we work with the landowner to gather information about it. We bring that information to our project committee that has expertise. If we need outside expertise, we'll call in that. And then we look at the different criteria, how it compares to our past projects, how it compares to projects we're working on, and it does receive a score. And, any sort of scoring exercise is going to be somewhat subjective, but if you have good criteria, you have it linked to your strategic plan, I think you can make good decisions about which projects to work on. So yes, we do have a process. We've definitely thought it through, and we want to make sure that we're clear with landowners on that.
And then, do you look at the quality of the habitat, for instance, if it has noxious weeds versus it doesn't have noxious weeds infestations? Is that part of the criteria that you look at?
Yeah. Well, I would say that any of these lands are going to have some invasive species issues, right? There's some legacy there. What we look at is habitat for wildlife. We look at water. We see water and watershed as a really important issue to look at in terms of ecological health. We look at the history of forestry practices in those areas. So yes, all of those are part of the evaluation. Yes.
On all these lands that you either own or manage, are there any pot farms on those lands?
So we don't, I want to clarify, we don't manage these lands. We monitor a conservation agreement. And we work with the landowners. The landowners are the managers of the land. So I just want to clarify that. But I would say there has been one property where there was an illegal trespass row, which the landowner dealt with really promptly and worked with the sheriff. That's an issue in our county. We're talking about, ranches that are 5,000 acres, 15,000 acres. Absolutely, that can be an issue. But what we found is the landowners that we work with have a really strong interest in making sure that land is held. Again, they are stewards of the land. And so what we found in that one instance, they were very open and transparent about it after we called in authorities, right? Very open and transparent about it, shared it with us. It was part of our monitoring visit that year. We've taken a look at it. There's restoration that's going on the site. So yes, it can happen, even in these areas. Yes?
How often did you monitor it and how extensive is it?
We monitor once a year. And every year. Every property, every year. Every 5 years for these that have some public investment, there's a more extensive report that's required. I would say already there's a report. We have to turn it in 30 days after a monitoring visit. We go out with CAL FIRE on the easements that are forest legacy easements. So we'll go out with folks from the agency. If folks from the Wildlife Conservation Board want to come, and they increasingly do, we'll coordinate the visit with them. And we'll pick different spots, right? There's been to put one of these agreements in place, you need to create a baseline of what it looked like at that time. So there's a lot of time and energy that goes into that baseline. And then you'll go out to different photo points and different spots that you've established within the baseline in order to monitor it. And obviously on a 8,000 acre ranch, you're not going to see the whole thing every year. But if you set into effect a rotating series of visits to different spots on the ranch that you've established in advance and on a regular schedule, you're going to have, I think, a pretty good sense of what's going on over time.
Is this an ongoing expense to the landowner, or is there an annuity that's set up to cover the costs?
There's a lot of questions about our finances. No, I'm happy to talk about it. So what happens at the close of escrow of conservation easement is we ask for a stewardship contribution. The landowner makes a contribution to the land trust. We calculate in advance how much it's going to take to pay our staff to go out every year. And then we say we're going to make 4% of an investment. It's a very conservative investing strategy. But 4% of the total stewardship contribution should pay for our time every year doing that. And so far that model's worked pretty well as a business plan, right? So the idea is you never touch your principal, you generate interest or income off your investment. There's no interest that anyone's generating right now, right? But you generate some income off of your investment, and then you're able to pay your staff to go out. And that's part of one of those practices we put in place to guarantee that we're going to be around forever in order to monitor these things that we, as a society, are important to invest in.
I noticed you say should cover. So what if it doesn't? Is there another cost of the landowner?
No.
Or they're done what they do?
No, and what we found is that there can be years where there's a little bit more to do, right, for whatever reason, but it averages out over time, because there are some years it could be a little less. So far, the model's working out. We also, as part of that contribution, there's a legal defense fund, so we have a full legal defense fund, and we also have we take out conservation easement insurance. It's insurance for everything. But there is conservation easement insurance, yes.
Is there any public access to any of these lands that have a conservation easement?
That is not part of any of the conservation easements that we've established. No, but again, we are concerned with public access onto the properties that we own, including investing the resources to build a nature trail for our community. A lot of these properties you saw on the Google Earth tour are very remote, very difficult to get to, sort of a ways back there. And we feel like if we're able to share the story of what we do close to an urban area, close to 5 minutes drive from Eureka, then we're going to be able to get people out there who might not otherwise have access, or might not otherwise be able to learn the story. Some of our school groups, kids have never been to a farm, and they've never been on a trail. And they live in Eureka, right? And I'm serious, we get that. And so we feel like if we're making an investment somewhere in terms of public access, we're going to invest first in the next generation, and second, we're going to invest in an area where we can bring the most people to work. That's a great question.
And I was wondering, what road is that Martin Slough on?
Martin Slough is on Pine Avenue. Yeah.
I didn't want to take time on it, but if we wanted to try and get a school group out, should we talk with you guys or with Friends of the New and School Formers?
Yeah, talk with me.
This kid class.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds great. Okay. I want to make sure that there's time for the movie within our time period. So let me start the movie, and then if there are additional questions, then folks, we can have side conversations afterwards. Does that work? I want to be respectful. Gretchen, how's the time look for you guys?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
The Creator, Darwin, got with, brought us here and put us here from time and beginning. So we've been here for the beginning of time.
The North Coast has an amazing portfolio of natural resources. These are community assets held in trust by and for all Californians. It's just really an extraordinary part of the world.
I moved here from Nevada in '69. I love the land, I love the trees, everything about being here. And so this is where I wanted to raise a family.
I've been a resident of Humboldt County for about 35 years. I love to fish. I love the waters. Ever since I was a kid, and I didn't live here, I lived in the Bay Area, I sort of dreamt and fantasized about steelhead and the mystery and the majesty of these fish.
Lived on the North Coast about 20 years. one of the main reasons I came here was because of its diversity of habitats, of recreational opportunities, the critters. It's just stunningly beautiful.
You're standing on the very first piece of property that my great-grandfather bought on January 9, 1884. 160 acres that he paid $250 gold coin for. We grew up fishing on the creeks and hunting and working. Lots and lots of work from the time we were young. Family pitched in and did everything.
I've just always been a country person, I think, and an animal lover, and there's not much else I can say about that. It's life, it's our life, my life.
My great-grandfather leased property to run cows and dairy heifers. We've basically been here since 1970.
It's just a really unique piece of property. It has lots of microclimates, streams and fish, and it's got a lot of history too.
Through turns of events, Jackie and I and her mom now own the ranch. And it's wonderful, a wonderful way of life. Properties like this need to stay in production to sustain our local economy and, provide good resources. We're working on a conservation easement to keep it a working ranch, keep it so it's sustainable for my grandkids and on down the line.
My people came here in 1898. This ranch, the main part was bought with 5 gold pieces.
We're hoping that our children will be the 6th generation.
I have 100 years of collective knowledge about this particular piece of ground. And what we're looking at is how can we create a stream of income that allows us to have a living for not just this year or next year, but 10 or 20 years from now.
It's here, you have to take care of it, you don't make anything off it if you don't take care of it. You have to somehow figure out, how to make a profit out of some of the projects. The new people who come in don't know the history, and they're excited. They got the first piece of green patch of earth that's theirs, that they can build on and stuff, but they don't know how it is going to impact our community at large.
It's very important that private owners buy into this concept of stewardship. And I think most of them do. I really do. I think they love their land. They want it to be productive. They want it to be in sync with nature.
I think most private landowners have a great deal of interest in managing for diversity and for the critters, as well as for their other personal or economic reasons.
We're more interested in the end result on our land than we are in the quantity and economics of the logging job. Timber harvest plans in 1989 cost me about $400 a piece. Now the same timber harvest plan on the same piece of property would cost me $50,000.
Regulation was important and was necessary to correct some of the land management practices of the past. However, I think we're at this really odd place where the fulcrum has swung. The increased cost is such that we have to mine the resource more heavily than we want to from a stewardship and sustainability perspective.
For the turn of the century, when my family came here, they had 4 or 5 employees. 100, 120 years later, that same resource will not support a family and put kids in college.
2 years ago, 3 years ago, we topped the cattle market. This year we hit it at the absolute bottom. I don't think we've ever got that as little as we had this year. Same with timber. This year, if we cut anything down, I don't think we could give it away. There's just no market for it.
The carrying capacity of the ranches hasn't changed in 100 years. It's what it is. It's not like you can ramp it up and say, well, we'll run twice as many cows. You only have so much grass, you're going to run so many cows.
The history of the resources is that they've been decimated completely twice for family buyouts, and we don't want to see that again.
When we maintain and protect private lands, we're maintaining, protecting, and restoring a whole slew of environmental services. These include flood control, drinking water, of course habitat for fish and wildlife and wildflowers.
I think the general public benefits much more than the individuals on the property, because we get the benefit of this beautiful landscape forever.
You know, you drive out here and you see this landscape and think, boy, those guys must be rich. Well, I guess we are if we sold it. I don't look at our ranch as an asset. An asset is something that you're willing to liquidate. I'm not willing to liquidate it.
If it doesn't stay in my family that really loves it, it's more than likely going to be subdivided and broken up into small pieces.
When I subdivided part of the ranch, and I experienced grief. It's like guilt. Guilt to the family that sold property to us originally.
My grandfather would roll over in his grave if I subdivided. He built this place, and it's my responsibility to carry it on.
If we can work together, the private landowner, the community, and the government can work together so that those who have been taking care of the land remain still taking care of the land.
Very fast pace. Do folks have any other questions? Again, I wanted to thank you for coming out, for kind of hearing what I had to say, for interacting. And I'm happy to address any other questions people have.
Film online?
It is.
Film?
Yeah,
Great.
it's YouTube. Everything's on YouTube. Cool. Thank you